So we're going to continue our trend of discussing the histories of individual vessels within the Imperial Navy, and today we're going to take a look at a few Star Destroyers, but we're going to start with one that a lot of you might be familiar with. Let's take a look at the history of the Eviscerator. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So we'll just jump right in with the story of the Eviscerator, and that name may sound familiar to a lot of you because that's the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer utilized by Admiral Versio during the events of Star Wars Battlefront 2. The Eviscerator is a fairly standard Imperial II class Star Destroyer that was under Admiral Versio's command at the time of the Battle of Endor. Now, not much is known about the role that the Eviscerator played in the Battle of Endor, but we do know for sure that it survived the Battle of Endor, the destruction of the Death Star, and the evisceration of the Imperial fleet there. It's also interesting to note that the Eviscerator was likely one of the last Imperial-class Star Destroyers to leave the Hoth system, having remained behind to gather Versio and the rest of the members of Inferno Squadron. Admiral Versio and the Eviscerator then made their way to Vardos, where they would oversee the collection of equipment necessary to carry out Operation Cinder, the Emperor's contingency plans. In fact, it was from the bridge of the Eviscerator that Admiral Versio ordered Operation Cinder's activation against Vardos itself. Following Operation Cinder's activation on Vardos, we start to lose track of the Eviscerator a little bit, but it does crop back up at a very significant battle later on. We know that the Eviscerator played some pretty significant roles in the Battle of Jakku. Admiral Versio was one of the Imperial leaders recalled to Jakku to make one final stand in the name of the Empire. Now, we don't know for sure, but it's likely that the Eviscerator was part of the fleet up in orbit guarding the Ravager, the last remaining Executor-class Super Star Destroyer under Imperial command. With the Super Star Destroyer's destruction, the Eviscerator was forced to evacuate into the atmosphere of Jakku, where it made its last stand. It was within the atmosphere of Jakku that the Eviscerator was destroyed by heavy bombardment from rebel forces, and ended up going down with Admiral Versio at the helm, ending the story of this well-known Imperial-class Star Destroyer. Let's move on to another Star Destroyer. Let's talk about the Conquest. Now, this is one that a lot of people are less familiar with, but it was actually in two separate movies. Interestingly, the Conquest is an Imperial I class Star Destroyer, but we do see it post-modification where it looks like an Imperial II. The Conquest was part of a small squadron of Star Destroyers dispatched to blockade Tatooine following the Devastator's capture of the Tantive 4. Well, Imperial forces were searching the surface of Tatooine for the droids that contained the plans for the Death Star. These two Star Destroyers, the Conquest and another unnamed Star Destroyer, were in orbit, and when the Millennium Falcon attempted to flee Tatooine, it's pursued by two Star Destroyers, and one of them is the Conquest. Now, as we know, the Millennium Falcon does slip out from underneath these vessels, but the Conquest story doesn't end there. Sometime following the Battle of Yavin and the events of A New Hope, the Conquest is drafted into Darth Vader's Death Squadron, where it becomes part of his fleet that's present during the Battle of Hoth. It's worth noting, by the way, that at some point during that transition, it was converted from an Imperial I to the more advanced version of an Imperial I that had all the features of the Imperial II. The Conquest would actually take part in the Battle of Hoth, being one of the many Imperial-class Star Destroyers ordered to blockade the planet and prevent rebel forces from escaping. However, it is noteworthy that we don't really know any specific roles it played during this engagement, just that it was part of the blockading fleet. And we know that following the Battle of Hoth, the Conquest was one of the Star Destroyers that would pursue the Millennium Falcon into the asteroid field. However, it wouldn't get too far away from the main body of Death Squadron and would return to the fleet, leaving other Star Destroyers to continue the pursuit. And while it was part of the main force of Death Squadron that once again entered the asteroid field, it would ultimately follow the Executor to Bespin, where it would be part of the Imperial fleet that blockaded Cloud City. Now, interestingly, that's where the story of the Conquest seems to end. However, I would wager that it likely remained with Death Squadron and was present at Death Squadron's destruction during the Battle of Endor, where it likely was lost in one of the many engagements with Rebel capital ships or possibly destroyed in the blast wave from the second Death Star. The Conquest is the perfect example of why I like talking about the stories of Imperial-class Star Destroyers. It is just one of a number of Star Destroyers on screen at any given time. It's usually just a nameless Star Destroyer, but it actually does have a name and have a pretty interesting and complex story. And while the Conquest may have been an Imperial I class Star Destroyer, it was ultimately converted up to the specifications of an Imperial II like the Eviscerator. And if you'd like to learn more about the Imperial II class Star Destroyer, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down in the comments what you think happened to the Conquest following the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Do you think it was present at Endor, or do you think that's too much of an assumption to make? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.